My daughter-in-law smiled sweetly as she handed me a dinner tray and pointed toward the cramped quarters behind the kitchen where the help used to stay. "You'll be much more comfortable back there," she said, her voice dripping with false kindness. "The main house can get so drafty for someone your age." My son just nodded along, avoiding my eyes like he'd been doing for months. So I took that tray, walked to those tiny rooms without a word, and made one phone call that would remind them exactly whose name was still on every deed, every bank account, and every legal document they'd forgotten about. Before we dive back in, let us know where you're tuning in from. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow, I've got something even more special lined up just for you. At 72 years old, I never imagined I would find myself in a situation like this. Never did I expect that the home my great-grandfather built, the place that had been in my family for 4 generations, would become a battleground. Clarendon Manor, nestled deep in the heart of Texas, had witnessed so many stories of joy, laughter, and love. It had seen the rise of fortunes and the passing of time, holding on to memories as though they were bricks, just like the ones that made up the walls. I had spent my entire life here with my beloved husband, Daniel Fields, building a family legacy that would live on long after us. But here I was alone, sitting in a small, cold room at the back of the house, eating off a plastic tray like I was a guest in my own home. The rooms where the servants once stayed, where I had never imagined I would have to retire to, were now my reality. I'd given everything to this family. My love. My time. My devotion. And now, in the twilight of my years, I found myself treated like I was no longer worthy of my own legacy. My name is Elizabeth Fields, and I never thought I would have to explain myself to my own flesh and blood. For 47 years, I loved Daniel, who, I believed, was my anchor. He was the one who showed me that dignity was not something you demanded from others, but something you carried within yourself. It wasn't about what people gave you, it was about holding your head high, regardless of the circumstances. Daniel passed away 3 years ago, and after the funeral, I thought the hardest part of my life was behind me. But I was wrong. So terribly wrong. The trouble started 6 months after Daniel's death when my son, David, introduced his new wife, Rachel Turner. Rachel was 28, younger than David by 7 years, and had everything I hadn't. She was a marketing executive at a tech startup in Austin, with perfectly straight blonde hair, clothes that looked like they were from some designer runway, and a smile that never quite met her eyes when she looked at me. Her tone was always polite, but I sensed something behind it, a calculated kindness that left me feeling like an outsider in my own home. At first, I was happy for David. After all, he was 35 and had been single for so long that I started to worry he would never find someone. He seemed so lonely, and I was thrilled that someone had finally captured his heart. Rachel seemed perfect, successful, smart, and she made him laugh in a way I hadn't seen since Daniel died. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. At first, I told myself I was just being overprotective, but then there were small things that made me uneasy. For instance, Rachel loved to walk through the manor, pointing out details of the architecture and talking about how she was documenting it for her Instagram followers. She'd ask questions about the property taxes, about how much it cost to maintain the estate, and would ask me if I was managing okay. It was subtle, but I couldn't help but notice that every conversation seemed to revolve around my age and whether or not I could still handle the responsibility of managing the estate on my own. There was always the underlying assumption that I needed help. When David announced they were getting married just 4 months after they started dating, I didn't say anything. He was an adult and I wanted him to be happy. They decided to hold the wedding at Clarendon Manor to save money, and I opened my home and my checkbook for them. A few weeks later, Rachel suggested they move in with me since the house was so big and I was all alone. At first, I thought it was a kind idea. After all, my home had always been full of life and laughter, and with David's new wife, the house seemed full again. The first few weeks weren't so bad. Rachel made coffee in the mornings and would ask about my plans for the day, and David seemed happier, more at ease than he had been in years. The house felt like it was alive again, with their voices and laughter echoing through the halls. But as time went on, things began to change. At first, it was small things. a suggestion here and there. Rachel suggested that the formal dining room, which had been the site of so many family dinners, would make an excellent office for David, especially since he was working remotely now. I agreed, but it stung a little to see that room repurposed. Soon after, she suggested turning the sitting room off my bedroom into her yoga space, and that was when I began to feel the subtle erosion of my own space. The library, a room I had enjoyed for decades, was next. The lighting here is perfect for my conference calls, Rachel said one afternoon, and before I knew it, I couldn't even go into the library without seeing Rachel's workbooks and laptops scattered across the desk. Even the kitchen, which had always been my domain, was no longer mine. I had always been the one to prepare the meals for the family, but now Rachel had decided to meal prep for the week and needed the entire kitchen for hours at a time. The turning point came on a crisp October evening. We were expecting guests for dinner, and I had spent the whole morning preparing my famous pot roast, the recipe Daniel had loved so much. When Rachel came into the kitchen and saw my preparations, she looked at me with what I can only describe as barely concealed horror. "Oh, Elizabeth," she said with that patronizing tone I had grown all too familiar with, "I completely forgot to tell you. I ordered catering from that new farm-to-table place in town. David and I thought it would be better to have something more contemporary for tonight's guests." I stood there holding the wooden spoon, my heart sinking. I had been cooking all morning, and now my dinner, my tradition, was suddenly worthless. "I wish you'd told me earlier," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could feel the sting behind my words. "I've been preparing this all day." Rachel's expression softened, her voice dripping with feigned sympathy. "I know, I'm so sorry. It's just that these are important contacts from David's work, and we want to make the right impression. You understand, don't you?" At that moment, I realized something. It wasn't about the dinner. It wasn't even about the catering. It was about me, about them trying to push me out of my own home, about Rachel's calculated manipulation. David walked in at that moment, smiling as he noticed the tension between Rachel and me. "Something smells amazing in here," he said, but his smile faltered when he saw the exchange between his wife and me. "Everything okay?" Rachel smoothly interrupted. "Oh, Elizabeth was just telling me about the roast she's been preparing," she said with a smile. "But I explained that we already have the catering handled for tonight." David's face seemed to briefly show a flicker of guilt, but when Rachel moved to his side and put her arm through his, whatever internal conflict he might have had disappeared. "Mom, you know you don't have to go to all this trouble anymore," David said, his voice gentle but firm. "Rachel and I can handle the entertaining now. Maybe it's time for you to start taking things a little easier." And that was when it hit me. I wasn't just being excluded from my own home. They were slowly, deliberately, trying to take control of everything. Not just the house, but my life. For the first time in months, I felt something shift inside me. Something far more powerful than hurt. A sense of clarity. I knew I had to act before it was too late. Before they tried to take away everything I had worked my whole life to build. I spent that evening in the sitting room, watching the flames crackle in the fireplace, trying to make sense of everything that had transpired. It was almost as if I were watching my life through a fog, and I couldn't figure out how I had gotten here. The house that had once been full of life, love and memories had now turned into a place of manipulation and subtle exclusion. I had always known that families can change over time, that life can take unexpected turns, but I never imagined it would happen to me, especially not by the hands of my own flesh and blood. Rachel, with her polished charm and her perfect smile, had wormed her way into our lives so effortlessly. I had seen my son David be charmed by her, and for a while, I wanted to believe the best about her. But every interaction left me feeling more and more like an outsider in my own home. What hurt the most was the way David had distanced himself from me. I hadn't realized how much he had changed, how much Rachel had turned him against me. It felt as if I was losing both my home and my son, one subtle maneuver at a time. As the days passed, I noticed other changes, small but significant. Rachel began to take charge of the estate, asking questions about the taxes, the upkeep, and the investments. At first, I tried to convince myself that it was just her being helpful, but it wasn't. It was strategic. She was taking over, slowly but surely, as if she were preparing for something bigger. I could see it now. She was trying to convince David and me that I was no longer capable of handling things. That the house was too big for me, that the responsibilities were too much for someone of my age. It was the same line she had been feeding him since she arrived. Then, there were the little jabs. Don't you think it might be time to think about moving to a smaller house, Mom? A place more manageable for someone of your age? Rachel suggested one day as we were sitting in the living room, just the two of us. The upkeep here is a lot of work, and you've done more than your share. The words hit me harder than I expected. Of course, she had always been careful to say them with that sweet smile, like she was concerned for me. But I saw through it. She didn't care about my well-being. She cared about taking this house off my hands, taking everything. I was no fool. But I couldn't show her how deeply her words had cut. Not yet. Instead, I just smiled and nodded. I appreciate your concern, Rachel, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But this house has been in my family for generations. It's not just about the upkeep, it's about preserving our history. It's not something I'm ready to give up yet. Her smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. Of course. I understand. I just want what's best for you, Elizabeth. You know that, don't you? I could barely keep from rolling my eyes. Of course, she wanted what was best for me, just as long as it fit into her plan. That night, after dinner, David and I sat in the living room. It was late, and he looked more tired than usual. He hadn't been sleeping well, I could tell. But what struck me the most was the way he avoided my eyes. He used to look at me like I was the most important person in his life. But now, it was as though he was ashamed of me. I wanted to reach out to him, to tell him that I was still his mother, that I still loved him. But something inside me held back. I knew I couldn't talk to him like we used to. Not anymore. David, I said softly, have you and Rachel talked about the future of the house? He looked at me quickly, almost guiltily, before glancing away again. I don't know what you mean, Mom. What do you mean by the future? I could see the conflict in his eyes. He didn't want to admit it, but it was there. Rachel had been planting seeds in his mind for months, and he was starting to believe them. He was starting to believe that I couldn't handle things anymore, that I needed help. I could see it in his posture, in his hesitancy, and it broke my heart. The house, David, I repeated gently. I've been thinking a lot about what Rachel said. About moving, downsizing. It's just hard to let go. This place is all I've ever known. It's where your father and I raised you. He shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. I know, Mom. I know. But maybe it's time. Maybe it's just time to let go. You've had a long life here, but sometimes change is good. You don't have to carry everything on your own anymore. Don't you see? I asked, my voice breaking slightly. This isn't just about moving or about change. This is about you letting go of me. About you and Rachel deciding that I'm no longer capable of making my own decisions. That I'm no longer fit to manage my own life. David didn't answer. He looked down at his hands, not meeting my gaze. And in that silence I understood. I understood everything. I wasn't just losing my home. I wasn't just losing my family legacy. I was losing my son. To Rachel's lies and manipulation. I couldn't let it go on. I wouldn't. The next morning, I woke up with a new sense of determination. I had been passive for too long. I had let Rachel and David slowly take away the things that mattered to me, and I was done with it. I wasn't going to sit back and watch them destroy everything my husband and I had built. So, I made a decision. It was time to remind them of exactly who I was. That afternoon, I made a phone call to Margaret Blackwood, a lawyer who had been our family's attorney for decades. She was the kind of woman who never underestimated anyone. And she wouldn't underestimate me. The next few days felt like a whirlwind. I had already made up my mind to take action, but knowing how complicated this situation was made it difficult to know where to start. Margaret had been my closest ally for decades, and I knew she'd be the one to guide me through the legal side of things. After all, this was no longer just about a son and a daughter-in-law causing tension in the family. This was about protecting my legacy, my home, and my autonomy from a well-coordinated scheme that was carefully designed to undermine me. I had a restless night, tossing and turning as I replayed the past few weeks in my mind. Every conversation with Rachel, every subtle shift in how David treated me, all of it suddenly felt like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. I couldn't believe I hadn't seen it sooner. Rachel had been plotting this from the start. She was just using David, manipulating his grief, his vulnerability after William's death. She'd known exactly what she was doing when she moved into our home, and now it seemed she was working tirelessly to turn David against me, to make him believe that I was incapable of managing my life on my own. I thought about everything that had happened, all the moments when I felt the creeping suspicion that something was wrong, but I'd pushed it away. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was just being an overprotective mother. But now, with everything in front of me, I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. The next morning, I called Margaret. She answered quickly, as I knew she would. "Margaret, I need your help," I said, my voice steady but filled with determination. "I'm going to fight this. I won't let them take everything from me." There was a pause on the other end before Margaret replied, her voice calm but filled with the authority I'd always relied on. "I'm with you, Eleanor. I've been through the worst of this kind of situation, and I'm not about to let Rachel get away with it. You've come to the right place." By that afternoon, Margaret and I were sitting in her office, poring over the legal documents. I hadn't realized how much of the Whitmore estate was tied to me until I saw it all laid out in front of me. The deeds, the trust documents, the investments my husband and I had made over the years, all of it. It was a lot. But it wasn't just the money that mattered. It was the legacy, the memories tied to every inch of that land. I wasn't just fighting for property. I was fighting for everything my husband and I had built. "You've made the right decision, Eleanor," Margaret said as she looked through the papers. "It's time for us to get ahead of this before it goes any further. We'll need to move quickly, but I'm confident we can get the legal protections you need." I nodded, but deep down, I knew that taking action would only escalate things. I was about to step into a battle I had never anticipated, one that would change everything. I didn't want to do it, but I had no choice. Rachel had already shown me how far she was willing to go to control this property, and I couldn't let her succeed. The house, the land, the family history, it all meant too much. Later that evening, after I had finished a quiet dinner on my own, I received a phone call from David. I didn't recognize the number at first, but when I picked up, I immediately knew who it was. "Mom," he said, his voice thick with uncertainty. "Can we talk?" I could feel the weight of his words even through the phone. David had been avoiding me for so long, and now, here he was, calling me out of the blue. I hesitated, wondering what he wanted, but I knew deep down that it was time to have this conversation. Whatever he had to say, I was ready for it. We arranged to meet the next morning, at the estate. I agreed to meet him in the living room, as I had done so many times before. It was strange, how the house felt so different now. Empty in a way, even with the furniture and the memories. I had spent so many years making this place a home, filling it with life and love, and now it felt as though I was losing it, bit by bit. David arrived just after 10 a.m. His eyes looked tired, and there was an edge to his movements that I hadn't seen before. I wasn't sure what he expected from me, but I wasn't going to make this easy on him. Not anymore. He sat down across from me, his hands clasped in his lap, his gaze focused on the floor. It took him a long moment before he spoke. "Mom, I know I've been distant," he began, his voice tight. "I know things have been strained between us. And I just want you to know that I never meant for it to get this far." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I wasn't about to let him off that easily. The damage had already been done. The words were there now, his actions, his silence, the way he had chosen Rachel over his own mother, over everything that mattered to us. I could feel the anger building inside me, but I pushed it down. "I never wanted to hurt you, Mom," he continued, his voice faltering. "But Rachel, she made me believe that you were struggling, that you needed help. She convinced me that everything I was doing was for the best. For you." I felt a pang of disbelief. "David, do you hear yourself? Do you hear what you're saying? You didn't listen to me. You didn't come to me and ask how I was doing. You let her convince you that I needed to be managed. You let her control the narrative." He winced at my words, but he didn't interrupt. "I know," he said quietly. "I thought I was helping. I thought I was doing the right thing. But I was wrong, Mom. I see that now." I folded my hands in my lap and took a deep breath. I needed to stay calm. I couldn't let my emotions dictate my actions anymore. I needed answers, not excuses. "Do you understand what you've done, David?" I asked, my voice steady. "Do you understand how you let Rachel manipulate you? How she slowly turned you against me? You've made a choice, and now, you need to live with it. But I won't let her get away with it. I won't let you throw everything I've built away." David's eyes filled with tears, and he looked up at me for the first time. "I'm sorry, Mom. I am. I never meant for any of this to happen. I just—" "Stop," I cut him off, holding up my hand. "You don't get to make excuses anymore. You don't get to pretend that you didn't see what was happening. I saw the way you looked at me, the way you distanced yourself. And I saw how Rachel kept pushing, kept manipulating you. You chose her over me. Now, you have to make it right." David swallowed hard, his shoulders shaking as he tried to speak. "What do I do? How do I fix this?" I paused for a moment, looking at him. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he was truly sorry for what he had done, but my heart was heavy. The betrayal was too deep, too ingrained in the fabric of everything we had once been. I wasn't sure there was any going back. "You start by standing up for me," I said softly. "You start by telling the truth. To me. To everyone. You tell them that I am capable of making my own decisions, that I am not the weak, confused woman Rachel wants you to believe I am. You start by being honest with yourself." The next few days were filled with a kind of quiet tension, like the calm before a storm. I couldn't shake the weight of the conversation I had with David, but there was something else that lingered, something that gnawed at me. In all my years of being a mother, I had never felt so disconnected from my son. The realization that he had so easily fallen under Rachel's spell, that he had allowed her to manipulate him so thoroughly, was more painful than I could express. I had hoped for so much more, but now, all I had were memories of the child he had been, the son who had once looked up to me for guidance, for love, for strength. But there was no time for regret. The situation had reached a critical point, and I was no longer just dealing with family drama. This was a battle for my freedom, my legacy, and my future. Rachel and David had set their sights on taking control of everything I had spent my life building, and I couldn't allow that to happen. Margaret had been clear with me. This was no longer about protecting myself from their selfish desires. This was about protecting the very essence of everything I had fought for decades. The day after David's visit, I received a call from Margaret. Her voice, as usual, was calm and composed, but there was an edge to it, one that told me things were about to escalate. "Eleanor, it's time," she said. "We have everything in place. The legal filings are ready, and I have an appointment with Detective Morrison to discuss how we're moving forward. The only thing left is to make sure you're ready to stand your ground." I took a deep breath, staring out the window at the sprawling Whitmore estate. The property stretched out before me, a testament to the legacy of my late husband and my own blood, sweat, and tears. The estate was more than just land and buildings. It was history. It was my history. And I wasn't going to let Rachel erase it, no matter how hard she tried. "I'm ready," I said, my voice firm. "Let's do it." As the days wore on, I found myself bracing for what was to come. I was fully aware that things would get uglier before they got better. Rachel wouldn't back down. And David, well, I wasn't sure what to expect from him. His betrayal had cut so deep that I was struggling to find a way to trust him again, but I knew I had to remain strong. Not just for me, but for the future of the Whitmore legacy. The following week, Margaret arrived at the manor with a stack of legal documents. I felt a rush of nervous energy as she handed me the papers, but I knew what had to be done. We couldn't waste any more time. Here we are, Margaret said as she spread the documents across the dining table. These are your legal protections, your declarations, your estate planning, everything you need to protect your assets. We've also prepared the documentation to counter any claims Rachel and David might make about your mental capacity. I nodded, my mind spinning as I glanced over the papers. It was all there. My declarations of competence, my medical records proving my sharpness and clarity, and even the letters from Margaret's law firm and Detective Morrison outlining the ongoing elder fraud investigation. It was clear that Rachel had underestimated me. But it was also clear that this fight wouldn't be easy. They were about to come for everything, and we had to be ready for whatever they threw our way. Margaret spent the next few hours walking me through the documents, ensuring that I understood every detail. She had always been thorough, and I trusted her judgment completely. She explained that the key was to create a record of my competence that would be indisputable. With the help of Detective Morrison, we would be able to prove that Rachel had been trying to undermine me, to take control of my life and my property for her own selfish gain. We're going to hit them hard, Eleanor, Margaret said with conviction. This isn't just about defending yourself. This is about making sure no one ever tries to manipulate you like this again. I nodded, feeling a surge of confidence. It was a long time coming, but I was finally ready to take control of the situation. I wasn't going to let Rachel win. Not after everything she tried to do to me. The next few days were filled with meetings with Margaret and Detective Morrison, preparing for the legal showdown that was inevitable. I could feel the tension building with each passing hour, each step bringing me closer to the moment of truth. Rachel, for her part, had remained eerily quiet. I knew she was planning something, but I didn't care. I had my team. I had the truth on my side. And I had the courage to stand up to her. On the morning of the meeting with the real estate developer, Marcus Rivera, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The past months had been filled with nothing but fear, confusion, and betrayal. But now, for the first time, I felt in control. I had the upper hand. I was ready to face Rachel and Marcus, and I was going to make sure they knew exactly who they were dealing with. As I walked into the meeting, I saw Rachel standing by the window, her back to me. Her usual air of confidence seemed to have faltered, just a little. She didn't expect me to be ready for this, but I was. "Good morning, Eleanor," she said, turning around with that same false smile she always wore. "I hope we can find a way to work together on this. After all, you've always wanted what's best for your family, right?" I could see right through her. Her words were empty, calculated. I wasn't going to fall for it. "I've had enough of your games, Rachel," I said, my voice steady. "This isn't about what's best for the family. This is about your greed. And I'm not going to let you take what doesn't belong to you." Rachel's smile faltered for a second, but she quickly regained her composure. "I don't know what you're talking about, Eleanor. We're just trying to make things easier for you. You've always wanted to preserve the family legacy, right? That's all we're doing." I couldn't hold back the laugh that escaped my lips. "You really think I'm that naive, don't you? You think I haven't seen through your manipulation? You think I don't know what you've been planning?" For the first time, Rachel seemed taken aback. She opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't give her the chance. "I've already made my decision," I said firmly. "This estate, everything that's mine, is not for sale. Not to you. Not to anyone. You may have thought you could take control, but you've underestimated me. I'm not just some helpless old woman you can push around. I am Eleanor Whitmore, and I am not afraid to fight for what's mine." Rachel's eyes narrowed, but she didn't say anything. Instead, she turned to Marcus, who had been standing quietly by the door, watching the exchange. He shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. I turned to Margaret, who had been watching from the doorway with a smile of approval. "I think it's time we wrap this up," I said. "Rachel, Marcus, I've had enough. You need to leave now." With that, I turned and walked out of the room, my head held high. I wasn't just protecting my property anymore. I was protecting myself. And I was finally done allowing others to dictate my life. The days following the confrontation felt surreal. Whitmore Manor, its legacy anchored in the land, now stood uncertain. Though I knew the battle with Rachel wasn't over, for the first time, I felt I had the upper hand. What had once been a passive existence had turned into an active war to reclaim everything I'd worked for. The legal proceedings moved swiftly. Margaret had laid out the framework for the case, ensuring that every shred of evidence was documented. Detective Morrison had gathered the information that would nail Rachel for her fraud and manipulation. The courtroom would soon expose her lies. But amidst it all, the ache in my chest remained. Thomas's betrayal had cut deeper than I could have imagined. My son, the one I had raised, had sided with Rachel, actively helping her manipulate me. The trust we once shared was shattered. Though he apologized, I couldn't erase the weight of his actions. The day after the confrontation, Thomas called. I couldn't avoid him forever. His voice trembled as he apologized, expressing regret for going along with Rachel's manipulation. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he confessed. "I was wrong." As much as I wanted to believe him, I knew trust couldn't be fixed with an apology. "We'll see where it leads," I replied, heart heavy with unresolved pain. The trial came, and the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Rachel remained confident, but as each piece of evidence was revealed, her composure cracked. Emails, forged documents, and manipulated conversations exposed her deceit. David's quiet complicity was also laid bare. The truth was undeniable. In the end, Rachel was sentenced to 25 years for her role in the fraud, while Thomas, despite his betrayal, was given leniency due to his testimony. Though the damage had been done, I felt a strange relief. The fight was over, but my real journey was just beginning. Back at Whitmore Manor, the house no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like home again. My relationship with Thomas would never be the same, but there was hope. Slowly, trust was being rebuilt, one conversation at a time. Despite the scars, I had survived, and I was ready for whatever the future held.